Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, host and co-host. Across the room from me, Mr. Mamoud Mboj. Mr. Mboj, the traditional greeting. Welcome to the program.
Cheers, Ade. Glad to be here.
And we have, doing the signing, we have Lamin D. Sonko. And before we deep dive into the program, just a brief explanation about what it's all about. It's called The Week in Review for a very good reason. We take 10 big stories from the week just gone by and we kick them around in some detail. Some we give a lot more attention to than others. So if you think we're spending too much time on one particular story, chill, relax. It's supposed to be that way, okay? So what is on the menu, I hear you ask? Well, there's an organization, Coalition of African Descendants, CODE. It's mainly people who've migrated from the West to come and live in the Gambia, people of African descent. And recently, in the last year or 18 months, a few of them have been the victims of, they've been murdered. And so they've raised concerns about that. Also, a completely different story, OMVG, this thing that's meant to boost our electricity so that in a few years we'll have no electricity problems to worry about. Well, the ministers from the respective countries met recently here in the Gambia. Also, whilst the rest of us are basking in the sunshine that traditionally comes with the tourism season, in parts of the UR, they're still dealing with flooding, Fuladu East to be precise. And also, the one we've all been waiting for, CAF officials arrived in the Gambia on Thursday. You know why they were here? To inspect the Independence Stadium. Is it fit? Is it not fit to host international matches? Also, we go abroad. We look at Turkey celebrating 101 years of the establishment of the Turkish state, the modern Turkish state. Also, Israel-Gaza war. We delve into that, and we have a Gambian perspective on that. It's something that has gripped all our attentions. And also one that I cannot forget, here in the Gambia, there are people who've been living here for decades and yet they are what? Stateless. Yes, take my word for it. So these are some of the stories on tonight's program. So let's get kicking with the one I mentioned first. Coalition of African Descendants. They recently called a press conference to voice some of their concerns after yet another of their members was found murdered here in the Gambia. Have a look and have a listen.
It's come the time where we no longer can be quiet. I remember when I first came to this country and we used to have little situations that would be happening and people would say to me, shh, 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 be quiet, don't say anything.
What is happening now affects the whole community, not just diaspora, but everybody living in the Gambia. You know, it affects the whole community. You know, a killing normally affects a community.
Lord Robertson, a friend of the late Sakina Chinedu, who was violently murdered in the Gambia in May, shared that Sakina's killing sent shockwaves through the African descendant community. He joined others in calling for increased support from law enforcement for the community, noting that such violence is deterring other African descendants in Europe from considering settling in the Gambia.
Mr. Mboj, I'm one of those people who has settled here in the Gambia. Perhaps I have more roots than some of those folks, with my father having been born here. Nonetheless, I grew up in Sierra Leone and in the United Kingdom, but when I decided to retire, I retired here. And that's been the experience for some of these people. We heard mention there of Shakina Chinedu. You and I had interactions with her. You know, very pleasant, dynamic young woman. And as is said there, it's quite a shock. And so this is the latest, and it's caused. And as they've said to us, some people are thinking, is Gambia the place for me? What do we do about this?
Absolutely. I mean, the phenomenon of migration, it's always been, some people say that the history of culture is the history of migration. Just as you have people leaving, now we're beginning to see the reverse happening.
Sure.
People living over there of African descent, and even Africans ourselves. After a while, they say, I want to go back.
I just saw a BBC documentary about lots of people going back to Senegal.
Absolutely,
in
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's a modern phenomenon. There's really no issue with that. I mean, with all of us, because I had personally interviewed Shakina while she was alive on one of our programs. So when we heard that she was killed, we were all in despair. It was really a sad thing, terrible thing to happen. It was appalling. And now we've heard this case, Leonard, the person's name, Leonard Dominique, something like that. And yes, when these things happen now, everything is amplified, isn't it? Because of the social media and stuff. And with us as well, we want to push back a bit.
Yeah, sure.
In many ways, because you're also hearing that there are Gambians being killed.
This is it.
Isn't it? Being killed, being robbed, being stabbed, all sorts of things.
All the things that...
Yes. So I would like to think that they are not being targeted as a group.
Sure.
Now that will be something serious that we look into it.
Yes.
You may have a few groups that are doing that, as it were, seeing them as vulnerable groups. You know, we understand that in Jamaica, for instance, they're particularly vulnerable there. People who decide to return because of the killings. I can give you first-hand
experience of that. One of my
that.
best friends, he only lasted a year. Because so many of the fellow people of Jamaican descent who had gone back from the UK, so many of them had been killed, not just robbed. He went back to the UK and he's living there again.
Absolutely. So there are certain things that we're trying to avoid. We don't want to degenerate to whatever levels. But again, right now, we must have a balanced perspective.
Sure.
When I diagnose a situation, I shouldn't be too emotional, otherwise my prescription wouldn't really sort it as it were.
And in fact, Adrian, who we heard in there, was asked by somebody, are you raising this because you think, as you said, that you're being targeted, and are you asking for special? And he says, no, we're asking for the law enforcement people to enforce the law equally. We're not asking for special privileges.
Binta. One of the members talked about the police being underfunded and that sort of thing. We all know what the issues are. That is true. But again, when I look at the fact that there's a suspect was apprehended in Shakina's case,
that's right,
and the prosecution is going on. Perhaps I would have been more worried if they had not made any apprehensions.
Indeed.
That I would have been more worried.
Sure.
So let us try to maintain a balance here. Maybe the police sort of ought to look into this, you know what I mean, this particular phenomenon of those who are coming around, depending on what evidence, what information they have, maybe, or let's just keep a cool head, have the right policies that would be effective and fair, as it were. We're trying to get both here and keep cool heads, though these tragedies, any death is really a tragedy.
Indeed.
And this is really awful. You know, we should be welcoming of
well,
these
indeed,
people.
yes. And that for me is the kind of double tragedy. These are people who felt this was a haven, and they gotten fed up with the West, as I had become. And so we come back here, and this is the last thing we expect. And you know, it would be a tragedy if, because of it, people start turning around. But we need to keep the perspective of the numbers. Thankfully, the numbers are small, and may it stay that way, or may there be none. But as you said, we don't want to get the sense that they're being targeted as a special group.
That's it, and I suspect that as well. The police will have a massive challenge because of this demographic shift we've seen now.
Yeah.
You've got lots of youth, lots of young people around. Not all of them would be engaged productively.
Sure.
Yes, just as with any society, apparently 5% are psychopaths and another percentage are sociopaths. In any society, we have our share of these things. They will happen. The issue is, how do you prepare yourself, and when they happen, how do you deal with them? I do hope that these people who come over, you get an advisory, because we know that most murders are done by people close to you.
Exactly.
Maybe who can you befriend or not? Or how, how do you become cautious? Then perhaps you can minimize the opportunities for these predators to attack. All we can do is just minimize risks. We can never entirely remove risks. So this is the key. How do we prepare And then when these things happen, yes, the police, how do you investigate? Are you apprehending them?
Yeah, quite.
Even though in this case, we've seen that in Shakina's case, they've apprehended a suspect and that sort of thing. Are we getting the sentences?
And
the
also
right verdict?
in Dominic's case as well, somebody
Yeah,
has
in
been
Dominic's
arrested.
case, somebody's
Sure.
been arrested,
Sure.
stuff like that.
Sure.
So how do you do more to prevent?
Indeed, indeed. It's a complex one, but thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Story number 2, the OMVG Council of Ministers. They met here in the Gambia recently, and from countries in the region, Guinea-Conakry, Guinea-Bissau, etc. And, of course, we're hoping that one day when this project is up and running, I'm smiling because of the problems we have with electricity these days, that these problems will be a thing of the past. But here's some of what some of them had to say.
To urge members to prioritize the construction of the Sambangalu Dam, we have to make sure that there is close collaboration, especially in combining our resources for the success of our projects. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to, on behalf of the Council of Ministers, remind us all of the need to settle our arrears and our current shares. That is the only way we can achieve success. We have to show
Seriousness was the word you didn't hear there, as it was cut off there. But that was the representative from Guinea-Bissau who was speaking, Mr. Mboj. And as I said, we've carried many of these stories about the OMVG project. And there's times when we want to just kind of fold our hands and say, you know what, let the talking end, just deliver on it. But it seems as if, others are saying similar things, like the guy from Guinea-Bissau. Pay your dues that you're supposed to be paying. Let's get serious about this because we owe it to our citizens.
Absolutely. Honorable Malam Sambu.
Sambu.
There.
That's right.
Absolutely. And when I look at the name of the project, Ade, the Gambia River Basin Development Organization.
That's right.
And doesn't it sort of betray its origins?
It really does.
Almost as if that was really Gambia's project.
Yeah, quite.
And one gets that sense that the idea really emerged in our conversation with Senegal.
Yeah, quite.
But I suspect that the original idea, the originator, is really
the
Sardauna
Gambia
Kairaba Jawara in many ways.
I would just suspect so, yes.
Yes. In many ways, shouldn't we really take ownership? Maybe we are, but established in 1978.
That's right.
But this tells you it was always going to be sort of a long
well,
term project.
Indeed, yes.
Because
it involves
so many different countries.
Quite.
And each nation had to sort of consolidate, as it were, its structures to make them work.
That's right. Before they could be interlinked.
Before they could be interlinked and all of that.
Yeah.
And even now, one gets the sense that the end is getting nearer, isn't it? Certainly, government sort of generates.
Well, indeed.
The way we talk about it, it generates the sense that we're getting very close.
Yeah, quite.
But still, maybe that is making us eager even more.
I think so. And every time,
to get there,
because every time they commission yet another power station, we think, oh, it's around the corner, and then we find out that it's not. We're still experiencing in many of the countries that are party to this, they're still experiencing problems with electricity generation.
So even though we were informed, weren't we, on October 12th, that we had started sourcing energy from Guinea.
That's right.
Yes,
that's
but
right.
We should listen to Honorable Sambu. They are very interesting, urging all members to prioritize the construction of the Sambangalu Dam. Is it that they are not prioritizing it, or are they just lukewarm in their approach? So there's a way that we can read this. So this is the preceding meeting, isn't it? Before you had the heads of state coming on. Hope they will address this. And you mentioned it, settling arrears and paying our current shares. It's time to get serious. So right there, that honourable members just catalogued for us the potential problems that
and he's kind of calling out people without naming any. So when the heads of government come, then these are the challenges that you need to address. But again, just as we said in the beginning, because of the weaknesses within these individual nations, isn't that really what the key is? With these weaknesses, I suspect that there will be gaps in this project for a while. Yes, because they're not all at the same. They're not all running at the same pace.
You need a certain alignment. I feel, in a group, so that would be the clue. You know what I mean? Sort of in sort of similar stages of development, similar infrastructural maturity, if I can call it that. Perhaps you need a certain threshold for these bodies to really work the way you want them to work.
But right now we need it. Thank you. Thank you very much. And on to story number 3, a very different story. As I said at the top of the program, most of us are basking in really hot sunshine, 33, 34 degrees. It's the tourism season, which means it's dry and hot. However, in some parts of the country, they're still reeling from the effects of flooding. Not flash flooding, but flooding that kind of happened gradually. Where? Fuladu East, in the Upper River region. Have a look, and you will believe.
The areas of Basse Wharf Town, Madina Kabakama, Basse High Level, Basse Layout, Kerawan Badara, and other nearby communities have been inundated. The flooding has left hundreds of families in despair, rice fields submerged, and businesses closed, resulting in significant economic losses. The rising river is steadily encroaching on the central town of Basse. Businessman Julaba Dabo, whose timber business has been affected, noted that while similar floods were last seen in 2003, they have never been this severe.
21 years ago. Mr. Mboj, now if people had seen the longer version of that story, they would have heard people saying that where they live is close to the river and they frequently experience flooding. And one of them even went so far as to say there's a market here, perhaps the government can re-situate that market away from the river so it doesn't experience flooding. And I have to be honest, our own cameraman was rather exasperated because he said he'd been around when, over a couple of years ago, some of these same people were told, don't build here, move. And decided not to bring that bit in the story, but he was exasperated. He said they're not helping. So it's quite a complex matter, but what we do know is there is flooding and it's impacting the community greatly.
Absolutely. So that is in our report. There's a bit where we say that this is becoming a common phenomenon, really, the flooding. And for others, they said they were surprised. So I'm like, it is the severity.
It's the severity of it.
The severity of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
they haven't seen this. The Basse River, the banks, there was a bust. It bust its banks and these things happening. Then I thought, what were the risks that the banks would burst? Do we have information? What people do is one thing, but do we have the right information? And then how do we advise them? And of course, the issue of enforcement, insisting that you cannot build for your own sake, actually. That is why you cannot build in this area or that area. So that is the issue, isn't it? So the usual shortcomings really
exposed again. You know, as you said, you know, the likes of NDMA, had they done a kind of feasibility study to say, and as I said, as our cameraman said to me, you know, on the phone, he said, look, these people had been told, don't build there. I said, well, they just ignored the warning. But he said, the lack of enforcement is all right telling them, well, can we force them not to build there? Can we prevent them from building there? And so we don't have this kind of tragic situation.
Absolutely, and it's just so sort of easy to blame people. You know what I mean? They also, there is contributory negligence. There's really no denying that. But when you have most sort of ordinary folk, sort of no education, they really cannot calculate risks. And they have a certain belief system, as it were, that will make them perhaps ignore the information. How do they process information?
If you have the law on your side and you said you cannot build here, well, enforce that and stop it. So, you know, play your role so that they don't build it.
That is what makes a whole difference. That is why sort of development workers, thinkers, insist on proper institutions sort of working. That is where then you can regulate conduct. You're not necessarily changing their beliefs. They have their beliefs. But my public conduct, that's really what you are regulating. And that's really how institutions work. I mean, just read a bit about Lee Kuan Yew telling you how things were built. So this is the key. You need that to work. It sort of helps people, as it were, to do the right thing. And we are still in the process of building that,
Of
of
building that and learning how to do
consolidating,
that.
learning how to do that.
Yeah.
We just thought that things would come quicker, early. We thought that we were okay.
Yeah, sure.
Just give us independence and we'll do it.
Yeah, quite.
Now we are beginning to see that when you apply ideas,
Sure.
it takes a lot more time.
Yes, I think
than-
we might
than
have
you
to have
want.
a whole thing about that independence, because I watched a documentary yesterday which horrified me, and it was a Nigerian claiming that Nigeria got independence too early. But
Some people said that that's another point.
that's another thing altogether. But thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. Story number 4, CAF, which is the Confederation of African Football. They sent officials here for a 2-day inspection visit of our Independence Stadium, our one and only national stadium. What did they find? I won't spoil it for you. Have a look, have a listen, and we'll delve into this when we come back.
The CAF inspection officer was taking on a guided tour of the Independence Stadium immediately he arrived. He could be seen taking pictures of the stands. The pitch was also part of the area he observed, including getting a feel of the grass. The VIP area was the last part he inspected before leaving. He will complete his inspection work today, Thursday. After his task is completed, he is expected to report to CAF, after which a decision will be made on whether to approve the stadium to host matches. The Gambia vs Comoros is settled at the Independence Stadium for the 15th of November 2024, pending the approval of CAF authorities. To the untrained eye, the renovation work has given the stadium a new and impressive look, which was constructed 4 decades ago. There are seats in the stands, the scoreboard has been digitized, and the dressing rooms looks beautiful. The Gambia last played home at the Independence Stadium on the 25th of March 2021 against Angola in an AFCON qualifiers, which ended 1-0 to the Gambia, a victory which confirmed the Gambia's maiden AFCON qualification.
And maiden qualification, that historic match against Angola, and so it would have been fitting. So I'll put the audience out of their misery. The CAF official, not saying he gave mixed signals, but when he spoke to some of the officials, he did use the words, "I'm very impressed by what I've seen." And people took that and ran with it and said, he's given approval. But once he had submitted his report, he gave top marks to everything except the pitch.
Absolutely. We were not really listening
We weren't.
because I'm very impressed.
Yeah,
It's not quite.
It's
the
not
same
the
thing
quite
as
of-
I approve.
I approve. we read more into his words than he uttered.
But these people are clever. They're diplomats, so they
Indeed.
know how to not to ruffle feathers
quite.
unnecessarily. That sort of thing.
That's right.
Absolutely. When we first heard, with the optimism, there was so much optimism
Yeah.
generated, thinking that we'll get the clearance,
Sure.
so that in November we could go, and watch the Gambia play.
Sure.
And the reporter there said that the last time we played there in 2021, we won 1-0.
Yeah.
Then I thought, I wonder what was the difference of the supporters, the
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
in the
what
performance.
did they make?
I wonder
Yeah,
if
go
we
on.
had played in Morocco, would we have beaten them? Obviously, these are all moot points.
yeah, go on.
But I suspect that playing at home, having all that crowd behind you, it does a lot.
It really can,
Psychologically,
because we've
part of
seen
sport is psychological.
it really
isn't
is.
Your adrenaline level, perhaps.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, it will be
You
boosted.
talk about it being the 12th man,
Being the
sometimes
12th
the crowd.
man.
But our colleague Gajaga there said something also which was very interesting about, to the untrained eye, it looked fine. But of course, I think that it also helped to allow us to get carried away with it. We thought, wow, it's really impressive. But of course, these guys were looking for finer detail. If I had a bone to pick with CAF, it would be to say that from what I saw of the pitch and what I've seen of some of the pitches that they have approved, how did you approve those ones and not this one? That's my only kind of quibble, really. But as our colleague Gajaga said, everything else looked pretty impressive, but the pitch didn't pass muster.
Absolutely. I mean, we have sort of watched matches here where somebody would say, yes, I mean, look at
the pitch.
Look at the state of that pitch.
Yeah,
how
how did they
they've got
get
the approval?
approval?
They've
Yeah.
got the clearance
Yeah.
to hold these matches there,
I
whereas
saw
we
a
haven't.
Cameroon one recently, last game they played. It was dreadful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But here, fine. They've given us their view. Now it's up to us to sort of respond.
Yeah.
Fine, there's something wrong with the pitch. Why?
Yeah.
Is it a question of money?
Yeah,
Or
right.
is it expertise? Is it the right grass? Is it,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
there are all sorts of things. I think it is its own science. People who know these things,
Yeah.
when they talk to you about it, you're like, yes, you've got all of that in this.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
right.
it takes expertise, really,
Yes.
to do some of that. So what is the issue?
Sure.
It's really high time that
Yeah.
we
I recall watching once a Leicester game, and the lady who was watching with me, she's into football big time, and she said, "This looks like artificial pitch." And I said, "Oh, the Premier League have outlawed wholly artificial pitches." But when we went online and checked, actually their pitch is 3% artificial grass.
All right.
So it's mixed with real grass.
Absolutely,
And we see now pitches, and when you look at pitches from the 70s and 80s, you think, how on earth did they ever play on those?
Absolutely.
So you're right, we need to go back to the drawing board. What is it we need to do to bring it up to the standard that will get the tick mark and say, yes, it's now fit to play? Because it's a missed opportunity for us. November, the next one is not until March of next year. So it's a big miss.
Granted, but we've
Against
missed this
Kenya.
one.
Yeah.
We've missed it. Fine. Now let's just sort of have the resolve,
Yeah.
you know, and say that we will not miss the mark.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
stuff like that.
Quite.
So, but it depends. It depends. We
Yeah.
do not know what are the issues.
Yeah,
What are
I think
the
we'd need
sort
to
of
see the full
bottlenecks,
report.
as
Yeah,
it
yeah,
were.
yeah.
You know, to getting the right kind of pitch for the
Yeah.
approval.
Yeah. But hey, you know, we can't wait. But I can tell you, a sense of real deflation is what I felt when I heard that.
Same here. Because
I almost cried. I have to be honest, because my enthusiasm was had built up to such an extent. As I said, particularly those words, I'm impressed by what I've seen. I mean, I misread them as much as many people did, sadly.
And really
Yeah.
matches like that as well. They could be a day out with the family. But I was thinking
Yeah,
of going to my two boys. As
I
it
remember
were,
we
you know,
talked
all
about
of
it in
us
the
in our
office.
jerseys.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
So we're losing out.
Yeah, big
sort
time,
of
big
big time,
Yeah.
in many ways, really.
Yeah,
So let's just sort of
please, let's
put
get
our
it.
socks up and
Yeah, and get it
just get
done.
over.
Yeah, yeah.
So
the
final
words-
is the home straight, isn't it?
This is
We're
it.
now on the home straight. So
That's
just
right.
get to the line.
Absolutely. In the words of the Nike advert, just do it.
Just
Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And now on to story number 5. There are some people who've been here in the Gambia for decades, and yet, with the kind of quirks of our laws, etc., they are not citizens. They're neither citizens of the Gambia or anywhere else. They are stateless. You think I'm making this up? Have a look, have a listen.
For several decades, the Gambia has served as a peaceful home for many overseas nationals who left their countries to start a new life. Several years before the Gambia attained its independence in 1965, members of Ghana's Fanti tribe, mainly from the central coastal regions of Ghana, migrated to the Gambia for fishing expeditions.
All what the youth here need is let them just get their document. Let them have their right. Where I am standing, I go to the college. That's my level, the highest I've attained. Because to the university, I know that even if I have A, when you go there, they will reject you.
This initiative highlights the challenges of statelessness in the country and the collective effort required to ensure that no one is left behind.
And I'll spoil it for the viewers who might be a bit incredulous at what they've just heard. As I saw Mr. Mboj, there was another chap we interviewed, and we're bringing his story separately because I think it will move people possibly to tears. He came top in the exams, in the whole whatever. And when he was supposed to go to university, you need national ID. Now, because he is of Ghana Town, Gambia doesn't give citizen by birth. And so parents have been here since the 50s, grandparents have been here since the 50s rather. He's not a Gambian citizen, and he's not a Ghanaian citizen either. He is stateless, and so he's unable to go to university, and all his friends have gone, even though he was top of the class. That's the effect. I was horrified when I heard it.
Absolutely. I couldn't believe it, and you could read the incredulity on my face.
All of our faces, I have to say, when we first heard this story. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then when the gentleman, is it Mensah, Alexandra Mensah,
That's right.
said
Yes.
all they want is their rights. And I thought, well, there's the rub,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
If none of your parents
yeah, quite.
is Gambian,
Yeah, quite.
then you are not entitled.
Yes.
But still,
Yes.
talking about this group, they've been here for a very, very long
Since about
time.
1951, the first.
951, exactly before independence.
yeah, long
the
before.
Fanti people. I mean,
Yeah.
Kofi Annan from the Fanti.
Indeed.
John Atta Mills,
Atta
a recent
Mills, yeah.
president as well.
Yeah.
So we have to think about
Yes,
something
and in fact, if
to
people are wondering,
regularize. At least we need to regularize their situation.
Sure.
And yes, in our piece we said that we've signed the UN Convention on Refugees.
This is it.
But then I thought, strictly, are they refugees?
They're
they
not.
were not running from
They're not.
anything.
They're not.
So they're settlers in
They're
many
settlers.
ways. They just-
And in fact, this is what the officials who went, and in fact, if people are wondering what happened, officials had gone to register to see whether there could be a process to regularize them. And they were horrified. The reason they went there is because they'd been told about some of these problems. They say this is a very peace-loving community. There's one person who said they've been here since the 50s. None of them has ever been convicted of a crime. He said that's how peace-loving and peace-abiding they are. And so they'd gone there to register them to say, okay, maybe we need to pass some sort of law that allows somebody who's been here for this to have some sort of status where you're not denied college, you're not denied opportunities just because of this. Yes, your grandparents are Fanti and they came here and they didn't have any right and they weren't refugees. In fact, they kept making the point that they are not refugees, they're not asylum seekers, they are simply stateless. And it's kind of this limbo, because if you're an asylum seeker or a refugee, then you're one thing or the other. This, you're neither of those. And so there's a kind of grey area.
That's it.
they're trying to.
But as they say, kudos to
Like
the
it.
people who are doing this study,
And
as it
absolutely.
were.
Yeah.
It seems that group, they sort of slipped between the net, as it were. Perhaps nobody paid attention to that group with their peculiar needs,
Yeah,
as it were, given their circumstance. So, as I said, hopefully with the study, whatever's going to emerge from here,
Sure.
and then the right authorities will do what they do.
Sure.
And this is not just a Gambia phenomenon.
No, it's
go to Liberia, go to even Angola,
Guinea-
as far as
Guinea-Conakry.
Angola. That's it. You've had these Fanti people going
Yeah.
out for fishing. Well, the report says fishing expeditions.
Yeah,
they call it.
quite.
So yes, we can find a way.
Sure.
Perhaps people had not paid attention to that particular problem issue that they're facing, but hopefully now with recommendations that would emerge from this study, then we will do the right thing.
We'll do the right thing. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that brings us nicely to the break point. And we'll take a commercial break now. Join us after the break for 5 more fantastic stories. Don't go away.
yaa ko laajte QCell jox la ko yokkute am na si suñ promo bu bees bii di suñu bundle mega promo léegi mun nga dugga si internet bi si noo ko buggee ak num gën a yombee jëndal suñ data bundle package boo bugga te nga am si wàññite bu màgg dialal star 303 hash pour nga mun a jëfandikoo internet bi si network bu gën a yaatu jëndal 20 megabytes data bundle léegi si juróom-ñaari dërëm ak genn wàlla bu dul loolu nga jënda biga bundle lu dem ba 20 gigabytes waaw dégg nga ma 20 gigabytes data bundle ak suñ mega promo bundles bi mun nga jëfandikoo internet bi waxtaan si lu yàgga ñu jokkale la saa su ne fu ne pour am si lu leer mun nga call QCell customer care si 111 QCell ñoo xaali yoon bi ñeneen toppa lii dafa ànd ak sarta yuñ tëral.
Hello and welcome. And if you've just joined us, you're watching QTV's The Week in Review. And if you've been with us from the beginning, then you don't need to be told what program you're watching. And I'm your host, Ade Darami. And across the room from me, I have Mohamed Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thank you for your interjections thus far. And here doing the signing, I have Lamin D. Sonko. So let's crack on with the next 5 stories. Israel-Gaza conflict. In the office, we described it as the war without end. And it really does seem like it's the war without end. However, I was told yesterday that there are still peace initiatives that have been ongoing for the last 5 or 6 weeks. You wouldn't believe it if you see the devastation. Everybody, it seems, has an opinion about this, including one of our senior politicians. Have a look, have a listen.
The ultimate solution is really to move the Palestinian people and the Israeli people from the hands of these people who are extremists. That is what is required by demanding that there is a referendum in Israel and a referendum in Palestine for them to ask them whether they accept the two-state solution. Once they accept the two-state solution, then the people will decide. That is really ultimately what the solution would be.
July 24, 1992, the League of Nations entrusted Great Britain with the mandate for Palestine, recognizing the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine. Great Britain was called upon to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine, Eretz Israel. The creation of this mandate ratified the so-called Balfour Declaration, drawn up by the British and guaranteeing a Jewish homeland in the Middle East. It can be strongly argued that this declaration and its adaptation are at the roots of today's conflict.
So you heard the Balfour Declaration, but before that we heard Khalifa Saleh with his own contribution to this, Mr. Mboj. An interesting one in the sense that he's proposing a referendum between the two, the Palestinians and the Israelis, to get some sort of resolution to this conflict. Can it work?
I do not know. Perhaps the slight issue I have with the argument is this, is that we hold referendums in both Israel and Palestine.
Sure.
Yes. And then to ask them about the two-state solution.
Yeah.
But then afterwards he said, once they accept.
So you've assumed.
I have moved on, you see, from a question, but again, my argument has moved on to a slightly different premise. It seems to be taken for granted that they might accept.
That would be the result of the referendum.
The referendums,
yeah,
that's
quite,
it.
quite.
But again, even should both parties agree, accept that they want the two-state solution, and they just to draw the boundaries will take perhaps another 20 years. How do you draw the boundaries?
At the very
what
least.
What would constitute Palestine?
Yeah, quite.
Given all these inroads
Yeah,
they've been making in the West Bank.
Yeah, quite.
That sort of thing.
Sure.
So this is the most polarizing issue of our time for a very,
For
very
the
long
longest
time.
For the longest time. Yes.
And you cannot come to easy solutions. I think the longevity of it has proven that. And then how it polarizes the whole world.
Yeah, quite.
And let us look at the geopolitical context as well.
Yeah, quite.
Let us be honest with ourselves. Israel to the west, it's like that's our man in the Middle East.
Yeah, quite. That's right.
Be it the US,
be it
the European Union, be it anybody else. It seems the traditional enemy is the Arabs.
Yeah, quite.
Really?
Yes.
So Israel is really their man in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So we've seen what is going on. The utter carnage that is going on.
Sure.
Of course, everybody would agree that what Hamas did the 7th of October, that was utter savage.
Quite.
You know what I mean? I don't have to be either
quite.
this or
Just
for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really what we need to get away from. I think that's really what Khalifa also said there. How do we move away from these extremists running things?
That's
be it in Israel, Netanyahu and his ilk, the extreme right, or Hamas.
And what's
you don't
interesting
really
is
need Hamas there.
if I think sometimes we have short memories, because it was only in 2020 that they signed what was called the Abraham Accords, where Israel signed along with August 2020 with all these other Arab states, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, etc. And it was peace at last. But what they didn't deal with at all in the Abraham Accords, and I have to say, this is not me speaking with hindsight, I never thought it would work because they completely made no mention of Palestine. How was it going to work?
Before Abraham, there was Oslo. We've had these accords, haven't we, over the years, just to show you how intractable the problem here appears to be, wasn't it? What happened with Oslo?
Quite.
Ishaq Rabin,
Quite.
assassinated by another Jew.
Indeed.
Right-wing extremist.
Yeah,
So it shows how complex this whole thing is.
Yeah.
So this is going to be
Yeah, I
a very, very difficult one. Right now, more than 40,000 dead.
That's right. That's
Nobody
right.
can see any end in sight.
And that's
right?
40,000 Palestinians.
Palestinians, that's what it is,
Israeli
40,000 Palestinians.
1,900 or whatever.
Something like that.
Quite.
And when you look at the candidates in the US elections, we all know where Trump stands on
Well, this is it.
That's why Netanyahu would want Trump
To
to win.
win, yes.
But again, some people are disappointed with Kamala Harris. And
Which is why you have several imams in America coming out in support of Trump, remarkably.
But this is the wrong way to think about it.
Quite,
You know what I mean? You're canvassing. There are certain political dynamic within the U.S.
Yeah.
If you do not take that into account, you will lose.
Indeed.
So this is the key.
Yeah.
But once you've got the reins of power, that is a slightly different thing. But when in your campaigns, you are absolutely cautious. You know the dynamic within the U.S. We do not know it. We do not live there. So my judgment of how they're conducting their campaigns, I should be very cautious.
Sure. Yes, indeed. But this one, I suspect, sad to say, will run and run. Thank you for that, Mr. Mbuj. Now on to another matter in the Middle East, Turkey, the country that bestrides both Asia and Europe. And they recently celebrated 101 years of the founding of the Republic of Turkey. If I'm not mistaken, the first majority Muslim secular country. Here's a snippet.
On this note, I commemorate the founder of our republic, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, and his comrades in arms with respect and gratitude. Turkey and the Gambia are brotherly countries. Our friendship is based on shared universal values. We enjoy a strong cooperation in international fora, such as the UN and the OIC. Long live Turkey, long live the Gambia, long live the Turkish-Gambian friendship.
Long live the Turkish-Gambia friendship. So Turkey, I think the number of ministers who turned up for the celebration probably tells you the kind of seriousness with which we value the relationship with Turkey, which is why I thought, yes, let's mention it on the program, because they've done a lot, and they are still doing a lot with us here in the Gambia, Mr. Mbuj.
Oh, absolutely. They want to increase their imprint, as it were, in this country. Just as we've seen a good number of middle-income countries, as we say, that is why you have all of these summits. They call it summiteering Africa, and there's Africa and that.
That's
and
right.
that.
You know.
So they want to sort of improve, increase their imprint here.
Sure.
And why not? You look at it and see what can we benefit from that, because it's more developed than we are, so they can help us in all sorts of ways. I would actually prefer partnership, as it were. You know what I mean? It's just simply helping. It's just looking at what we need. Can you invest? When you invest, you will get your returns, as it were. So in that way, it could be win-win if we approach it in the right direction. So one party shouldn't go there thinking that I'm just going to see what I can get
from it.
Because as one writer once observed, we tend to be ruled by the idea of our own poverty. Somebody once observed that, and I hate that kind of mindset. So it could be a brilliant relationship. And we can also learn from their history. I hope we'll have the cultural exchange.
In fact, that was the thing I was going to come to, because you know, you hear many African countries talk about how Turkey kind of gravitated from the Ottoman Empire to the modern state of Turkey, and the way that it is progressed and developed over that 101 years now. And they think, oh, they did it. I mean, one of the things they did was they shared the Arabic language as the first language of the country and as the main official language of the country. You know, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, that was one of the things he did. And they developed their own script using the kind of Roman script rather than the Arabic script. And that was, he wanted a break between not just Arabic speaking, but also religion and state. And so in the first few lines, it mentions that this is a secular state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what happened before that was that the Ottoman Empire was defeated
Indeed.
in the First World War, when
that's
the war
right.
ended in 1918.
This is it.
So it was like a kind of discredited system. It discredited itself there, and it backed the wrong horse, as it were. It joined the other side, not Britain, France, and the like.
That's right.
So this is it. So he realized that was sort of like an opportunity.
Yes, to
that was
break
the time,
with the past.
that's it, for a great leader to emerge.
Sure.
And they will tell you that he was a brilliant general.
Yes, indeed.
Brilliant tactician, military tactician, that Atatürk. So he came with his 4 arrows, didn't he?
Yes, quite.
Republicanism,
That's right.
nationalism, statism, and the rest of it.
Yeah.
But he could get things done.
Indeed.
Educated, brilliant,
Yes.
vision, seriousness,
Yeah.
building institutions, reforming.
Yeah.
That was really what he did. So there's a lot that we can learn from Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, and we can apply here. So they moved away from that empire and tried to form a modern nation state.
And they've
what
succeeded.
are the ideas?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
What are the universal? There are certain universal ideas. Even though some people pretend that there's only particularism, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
we form ourselves within a greater whole.
Absolutely.
Everybody, that's what everybody does.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Budge. Got 3 more stories and I think 15 minutes to go, I hope. And 14th of November is World Diabetes Day, and it's commemorated around the world. And we came across some young Gambians who were commemorating here, and we're also trying to raise awareness about the condition here in the Gambia. Here's a snippet of some of what they had to say.
We have only one support, and they are far away from this country, but it is not enough. We need support from the government, we need support from WHO, we need support from UN, we need support from all the health organizations or the health institutions to raise awareness, to buy insulins for the young kids, for the test strips, for the testing machines, because we need to test our sugar levels 5 times a day, and without enough, we cannot do that, and that can cause diabetes-related complications.
That can cause complications. Mr. Mboj, the main reason I wanted to speak to these young people was because I was horrified to find out that even for buying things like insulin, they contribute out of their own pockets, $100 each a month. I said, what? I said, this can't be true. He said, yes, no, we do. He said, we have to do it, and we do it. So we've kind of taken it for granted. And that really was a shocker to me. I mean, it's a serious condition. It's one that's manageable. And as we've heard him say there, most of the support they get actually comes from outside the Gambia, not from inside the Gambia.
That's it. But again, Eddie, we don't really have a free national health service.
No, we don't. We don't.
we don't. So what they call is it out-of-pocket spending medically. When you look at the statistics, they're quite high.
Yeah, indeed.
That sort of thing you have to do.
Yeah.
What is important here is that we get the right information.
Indeed.
I think from our report,
and
I got a sense of type 1
diabetes.
Apparently most Gambians, most of these young people anyway, they are type 1.
That's right.
That's when you don't produce insulin, the body doesn't.
That's right.
So
Pancreas.
you need to take, the pancreas doesn't.
No,
so you take your insulin shots, isn't
That's right,
it?
you inject.
And stuff.
And he showed us it's like a pen, literally. You just push it like that.
And that's it.
They've
So
kind of simplified it.
we should understand sort of different types. There should be massive information on out there. How can NGOs help? How can civil society help? It must be sort of like a collective in many ways. Because when you think about it, if everybody who wants attention of government, let's be honest, should they go and sort of spend our money on all of that?
They bankrupt the country.
Cannot be.
It can't happen.
It just cannot be.
Can't happen.
So I'm not trying to get them off the hook.
No, sure.
But it's just the reality, isn't it?
Sure.
So this is how civil society, NGOs, and all the rest of it, and we are actually told that this was how America formed its democracy Funnily enough,
Yeah, quite.
mainly it was civil society led.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
indeed,
these
yes,
things
yes.
must be
Yeah, quite.
grassroots led.
Yeah.
Maybe here the democracy is not deep, because it appears to
It's
be
still, yeah.
an elite
Yeah, quite.
position. People at bottom, we are not really democratic, are we? We are more feudal.
Yeah, quite.
So this is the key. Right information, what could be a right strategy?
Sure.
I think that perhaps NGO, civil society, this is how they can help in practical
Yeah, sure.
ways, instead of sometimes perhaps having workshops and just
Yeah,
talking
quite.
a lot, what we're going to do this and we're going to do
Yeah,
that.
quite.
What about in practical ways? Some of these vulnerable groups, perhaps a supplement, complement what government is doing.
Thank you. And one of the things that they're doing is they're going around and speaking to young people who may have the condition without realizing they have it. They're
That's
feeling
it.
tired and
That-
this and
that
that.
awareness
And so they're going to
aspect.
schools, they're going to colleges. Yeah, sure.
Very important.
Most important. Thank you, Mr. Mboja. And that takes us to story number 9. Our penultimate story is about education, in a way, the UTG. They recently matriculated their 13th batch. Have a look, have a listen.
Like previous years, has been very competitive. We received 1,743 applications. However, we could only admit 1,075. Out of this number, 527 are males, representing 49%. 548 are females, representing 51%.
Mr. Mboja smiling there. I talked about the matriculation ceremony where they were kind of formally inducted. 1,743 applicants, 1,075. That's still quite high.
Yes, 1,743. Yes,
Yeah,
applicants,
applicants
and then
and-
we accept 1,075.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It's more than 90%. got in.
Not
Yeah.
bad, really, in many ways. And the numbers, 51 female. Quite drastic.
Well,
that was
that's
very,
right.
very
Yeah,
interesting
yeah, quite.
in there. So we're making their strides. So
Yeah.
gender equality advocates, like that is an interesting one.
Indeed.
Higher education, more female
than male. And also it's the 13th century ceremony, I beg your pardon, and it's showing that the UTG now established, embedded, and it's we've seen recently different schools being added to it, and the kind of infrastructure being improved greatly in the thing. So it's getting there. It's getting there.
Absolutely, the infrastructural aspects and all the rest of it. Yes, we've been seeing some improvements. I think perhaps the only area I take issue, we sort of had a trial run on this morning myself. What is education for? We want STEM engineers. That's all. We want all of that. But to my mind, education is not simply for labor.
No, quite.
That is more of the conception of the Philistine, what I call utilitarian minimalism, that sort of thing.
Sure.
The main purpose of education is civilizational.
Yeah, quite.
In the West, the sciences really grew up with the humanities.
Or as America Cabral said, the purpose of education is so you can take control of your own destiny.
Absolutely. That sort of thing.
Sure.
So the embedding, the primary embedding in a sort of set of values, within the framework of values, even the sciences, they need that, because education is also where you make citizens.
True.
We've seen how in many ways that is lacking.
Sure.
The people who are educated, they took over the state, look at what they did afterwards. They had these degrees, let's put it that way.
Exactly.
Because I remember James Langley telling us that some people are certificated, other people are educated. So let us be careful here. Education is for civilizational purposes. Of course, you need the career, but the career is one branch.
Exactly.
You see, it's a trunk
not
with
the
many
be-all.
branches.
It's not the be-all.
It's not the be-all. It's one amongst a huge,
Yes, as you said, one of several branches.
One of several branches.
Thank
really,
you.
you need to have that. We always say holistic. Let's
indeed.
have that holistic conception of education.
Sure.
Because that's where some of the gaps are when you see us, how we deal with ourselves, how we deal with the state, what we do to ourselves. You can see what's lacking.
Sure. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboja. Takes us nicely onto our last story. AFCFTA Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Slowly, slowly we're getting there. Now we're talking about digital trade. Have a look, have a listen.
The Committee on Digital Trade is currently meeting in Addis Ababa. Gambia is represented in the Addis Ababa meeting as we speak. They are looking at these annexes, Annex 2.0. So we want to expedite this national consultation to get our position documented and share with the negotiator who is currently in Addis Ababa to present it. And also we will formally submit these comments to the AFCFTA Secretariat for inclusion in the annexes.
In April 2019, the Gambia became the 22nd country to ratify the AFCFTA agreement, meeting the minimum threshold required for its implementation.
Minimum threshold required for implementation. I said when this story was broadcast in the office, I said in a funny sort of way, this might be the one aspect that might work, the digital aspect, where you're transacting digitally. You're not lifting things or driving things across borders when there are problems. You're digitally exchanging, I don't know, funds or shares or whatever. It will probably be the first to work, quite ironically, rather than the one that we always used to envisage about free movement of particularly goods. And this, and this is what they're working on now, digital trade element of it.
Absolutely. And yes, that could be the first thing to work. But I also suspect that in the beginning, it will benefit some countries more than others because of the asymmetry
exactly
in the infrastructural preparedness.
This is it, yeah.
So this is what is going to happen. So it will depend on how well we prepare ourselves so that we can join in as it were and benefit as
this is it, because they're talking about the kind of interlinked systems, and for those to work, there has to be, as you said, to some extent at a certain level, a similar level, but some will be more advanced than others in kind of digital trading already, where some are just starting, some are already well advanced on that.
Absolutely, and even recently they introduced a new app where you can lodge your complaints about this non-tariff transactions. So they are trying to do things, trying to create what we call the enabling environment, isn't it? But it's just that this is what we said earlier. Each country, you are really struggling in one way or another, isn't it? To consolidate the institutions and make them work to the level that really all of you can align, pull things together and make it work to our mutual benefit. Otherwise, if we have these systems to be at a higher level of development and the other one on the lower, so it's not quite working. So the political will, the infrastructural governance, institutional arrangements being in place, otherwise it wouldn't work. It will still be an ideal, an aspiration, working towards it. But we have to be realistic. Certain things must be on the ground, working, so that we can see the benefits. You cannot rig that.
You can't rig it. And to my friend Beatrice, who works on this, Beatrice Chater, I'm sure she's pleased to hear that. And that brings us nicely to the end of the program. Just thanks, Mr. Mboj, for your interjections. And thanks also to Lamidi Sonko for your signing. And of course, most thanks of all to the viewers for watching. Until we come your way again next week. Goodbye.